Just confirming that the meeting is now being recorded and the live stream is on. I've got a thumbs up here. Okay, I have pleasure in opening the council briefing of the 5th of December 2023 at 6 o'clock and welcome all those in attendance. The City of Vincent would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay our respects to elders past and present. Now, I do have an apology from Councillor Wallace, and I note that there are no councillors recorded as having leave of absence. Okay, and we also do want to note that Councillor Greer is joining us online at the moment. So I'm now going to hand over to any members of the public who are present. Is there anyone here who would like to speak? Okay, please just come forward to the microphone. If you haven't been to a briefing at the City of Vincent before, we do ask that you state your name and the suburb in which you reside, and also the agenda item that number of that you want to speak to. And we do time to 3 minutes. So over to you.
My name is Linda Harris and I live in Leederville. My question relates to item 5.4, Mount Hawthorn Youth Skate Space revised location. I understand that the original proposed location within Britannia Reserve was deemed unsuitable because of the poor quality of the soil. Personally, I think it is a good decision to move the skate park. The new location has much better parking and access. But if the soil is unsuitable for a skate park, will there be a similar problem for the proposed mobile phone tower? Will the soil be able to support the phone tower, which is proposed to be built in the reserve? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you like to come forward and speak? Thank you. You just need to say your name.
My name is Grace Orifici. I reside in Leederville, but I'm not sure what the agenda item number is. It was about the skate park.
About the skate park. So that's the same one. That's item 5.4.
Look, it was just basically I hope that it goes ahead because it is just something extra that young people need in the area. I've got young kids myself, and my children, or one of them has been skating since he was 4 years old and the other one is 2.5, and we spend 5 days a week at a skate park. And every person that we meet at the skate park, most of them are young kids from ages 4 to 10, and they're there with families. They're there enjoying the facilities. They're being used. You have nearly 900 kids, or over 900 kids at Mount Hawthorn Primary School. So this is just another added bonus, having a facility available for young children to access. And it's not just for young kids, it's just for families. And it just is a meeting place for people to come together and families. And so I'm just really here to hope that it does get built in that area, because it's just something that is needed, and it gets kids out of their households. It gets them physically fit. It builds that resilience, and it's not just available for young kids. I've never been to a skate park recently and had any issues with any kids of bullying, any, violence or anything like that. And you're seeing a lot of different people from different ethnic backgrounds, different ages, just coming together, communicating, and just really just enjoying that skate park. And it's just something that will build on the community, that we already have such amazing facilities here. It's just that added bonus.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, some of your remarks are going to be included in the minutes, and any responses, if they're required, will be in the agenda of the next council meeting. So what we're going to do now is we're bringing forward 5.4 on the agenda. So it'll be the first one dealt with. And also a reminder that we're not making any decisions at this meeting. This is a briefing. It's an opportunity for councillors to ask questions to the administration. We're going to be making the final decision likely on this next week. So there being no further questions, I close public question time at 6:05. Okay. All right. We have received written statements. CEO, do I hand it over to you to say, or
So I confirm we've received the following written statements. Sam Russell of Mount Hawthorn in relation to item 5.4, Tracy and Neil Gray of Perth in relation to item 5.2, and Paula Babbage of North Perth in relation to item 5.1. I note that a number of those raised questions in relation to the items and responses to those will be provided in the briefing notes.
Okay. All right, CEO, are there any declarations of interest?
Through you, Mayor, I'm on 2 declarations of interest I've received tonight, both from Councillor LaFontaine, the first in relation to item 12.2 on advisory groups, an impartiality interest, noting that Councillor LaFontaine has had social contact with 2 of the applicants. The second is an impartiality interest in relation to item 12.3, which is the information bulletin, which includes an attachment on black spot traffic projects. Councillor LaFontaine declares that she owns and resides at a property on Forest Street, North Perth, which is referred to in that item. And that's all I've received for tonight.
Okay, are there any other declarations of interest that need to be declared tonight? Okay, thank you. So moving on. Right, so do we just go straight to item 5.4? Okay, so we will now go straight to item 5.4, Mount Hawthorn Youth Skate Space revised location. Okay, Councillor Hallett.
Just to follow up the question from the public gallery in relation to the whether the risk of subsoil movement in the decision around relocating the skate park applies at all to the mobile phone tower.
Through the Mayor. So the proponents of the mobile phone tower prior to any construction in that location will need to undertake a geotechnical report of their own, and they will need to ensure engineering supports the tower in that location. I would say the barrier to the city in proceeding in the previously identified locations is the substantial budget impact that these works would have. It is assumed that the telco provider, if they have those same issues, would be able to factor in that cost as part of their construction.
I just might add from memory, and we'll confirm this in the briefing notes, the telco towers that Optus did undertake, it wasn't Optus, the provider, can't remember their name, did undertake geotech on that site already. So we'll provide that in the briefing notes. I'm quite confident that they've already done that work and confirmed that it's suitable.
Okay, Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow up on a question in the public statements around safety and the mix of uses in the area. Now that we're proposing a new location that's closer to car parks, just wondering if administration has any comment on that, or perhaps can provide some comment in the briefing notes.
Through the chair, what I would say is that this is approval for the location. The next stage that we'll move to is detailed design, which will incorporate some considerations about safety aspects that could be included. And for the briefing notes, we'll get some comments about what some of those things could be.
Thank you. And also for the briefing notes, could we have some information that I raised earlier in an email chain around consideration of connections of this location to Britannia Reserve? That was one of the positives. One of the benefits of the original locations was being co-located with existing facilities, and this is a bit more removed from that. So I'm just looking for some consideration. At what point in the process can we talk about how to connect this with the existing activity that happens in Britannia Reserve?
Okay, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. I had similar questions to Councillor Castle's, one about safety and proximity to the car park, so that additional information would be appreciated as well. Thank you. But a couple of others that I had were also fine for the briefing note. There was a mention in the reports around the opportunity to also upgrade the basketball ring and the basketball court. If there was any additional information around that and sort of how those processes might intertwine, that would be helpful context. And apologies if I missed this, but I was just hoping to have some clarification around the 30th of June 24 completion date, and whether that's now the same given the location change. Thank you.
Okay, Manager, do you want to respond?
Through the chair. So in relation to the basketball court, that's due for renewal as part of our works program. So if this location is confirmed by council next week, then as part of the forward budget planning, we will look to incorporate that basketball planning into our future program of works and try and integrate the two spaces. At the moment, we've just been holding off, waiting to see what would happen with this area. In relation to the 30th of June completion date, so at the moment, the grant was due to be used by the 30th of December. We're now seeking a further extension to that to the 30th of June, and we're confident from the supplier that council will make a decision next week to proceed in this location, that they can commence with the on-site works in January, February and deliver in time for 30th of June.
Thank you very much.
Okay, are there any further questions from councillors in relation to this item? Okay, thank you. In that case, we'll move on to the next item, noting that we will be making a decision on this matter next week. Thank you. Okay, councillors, now we move to item 5.1, number 500 Fitzgerald Street, North Perth, proposed change of use from restaurant cafe to restaurant cafe and small bar. Okay, so are there any questions or clarification sought in relation to this? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one from me. Noting sort of what the report said around the application now meeting the deemed to comply standard for car bays and the city's policies around car bays, I was just wondering if there was also a view from administration about the appropriateness of signs up at this site, directing people to go and park at Woodville Reserve, noting that, Woodville Reserve has a number of mixed uses at different times of the day. Thank you.
Okay, Manager.
Through you, presiding member, that's a good observation. In terms of its appropriateness, that's not what administration is recommending. So ultimately, you're correct in that the number of car parking bays being provided on site complies with the city's car parking standards. But that aside, what we've heard from community is that it needs to be made clearer in terms of where to find those car parking bays as well. And there is a separate application which has been recently determined, which is really setting out the installation of signage to direct customers in terms of wayfinding to say parking at the rear here. So that's been determined. That's a term of their approval. And that's something that will be provided in order to ensure that car parking is utilised on site and that those car parking bays provided on site are utilised and you're not relying on street car parking.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions, Councillor LaFontaine?
Thank you, Mayor. With the bike racks that are provided, they're said to be installed in the verge on Venn Street. There's 2 trees and there's also 2 teacups, I think, where most people put their bikes up against them. Are they teacups going to stay, and where are the bikes going to go?
Manager?
Thanks.
Through you, presiding member, ultimately the teacups are intended to stay. There is no intention to remove any teacups or street trees for that matter. In assessing the application, we've liaised with our engineering team and they're confident that there is adequate space in that verge. The wording of the condition is intentional to allow flexibility for us to design around some of those existing infrastructure in the verge. In terms of its specific location, perhaps through the briefing notes we'll give you a little bit more of an indication, but ultimately the condition would ensure that those bike racks are being provided.
Okay, are there any further questions? Councillor Warner.
Thank you. Whilst this all looks sort of quite simple on paper, community feedback I'm getting, and also the the public questions we were sent through suggest that it doesn't actually work like this, that there is ongoing issues with the parking, but obviously that's being addressed with the gate and all of that kind of stuff. So that's been looked at, which is great. And I dare say that's too recent to even see if that's had an impact yet. But I'm hearing that there are regularly more people on site than there needs to be, or than there is supposed to be. So there's regular hassle with that. And some of the questions came up about, really, is the capacity of the place equipped to deal with this number of patrons? The facilities, like the toilets, etc., are they okay to deal with this sort of increase in number? And I did notice also on the delivery times, we got Monday to Friday, but we didn't get the weekend times. It's sort of cut off there. So I just wanted to make sure that it was all sort of in hand.
Through you, presiding member, my comment would be that we need to be cautious not to conflate non-compliance with the terms of a planning approval and with the acceptability of an assessment of an application on its own merits. It's clear that there are alleged non-compliance, and there's been an ongoing investigation and compliance, I suppose, which has really led to this application being submitted. The observations from community is that there are more patrons that exceed the current capacity of 20 patrons. And also the gate that's been installed without approval, which has now been separately approved by administration, is restricting access to the site. So all of those things are resulting in amenity and impacts on site. That is a non-compliance issue, and that will need to be worked through. Ultimately, the terms and the conditions of a planning approval, there are separate responsibilities of the operator to maintain compliance with that, and we've got an enforcement regime supported by a policy to ensure that. So that will be dealt with. In terms of the merits of this proposal, yes, they're seeking to modify the number of patrons on site. So it would be adjusted from 20 patrons with unlimited staff, which is the current terms of the approval, up to 32 patrons and staff. Okay. When they originally submitted this application, what we went to community with were they were seeking approval for 50 patrons. That's what really incited, I suppose, some of the feedback around intensity and the scale of the use. So they've pared that back. They've heard community, and they're working with administration to arrive at 32, being the number of patrons and staff that would result in compliant car parking being provided on site. So I think in terms of respecting the policy setting, they're acknowledging that, and it seems like they are trying to work within the confines of council's policy setting. In terms of the deliveries on site, that doesn't change from the current approval. It's limited to, it's very intentionally limited to Monday to Friday between those hours. So it's not anticipated for deliveries to occur on the weekend.
Okay, are there any further questions? Councillor Hallett.
Just a minor one to follow up from what Councillor LaFontaine said about the artwork and the bicycle racks. Just wondering if in that response, do we have parameters around distance from public art that things are allowed to be installed in terms of maintaining the integrity of viewing, as opposed to just that it could fit there?
Through presiding member, I'll confirm that in the briefing notes.
Are there any further questions in relation to this item? I have a question. In relation to the bike racks, can I ask what is the favoured design of bike racks for that particular area?
To you, presiding member, I will defer through briefing notes to my colleagues in engineering, but there are Australian standards that prescribe short-term bike racks and what they look like. Most typically, they would be in the form of a U-rail or something in that order.
I'm aware of the Australian standards. I'm just also aware that certain designs are better with e-scooters than others. And so I'm just aware that as we are trying to, as a council, encourage more alternative forms of transport, that maybe as we're looking at these designs, we can look at not simply what is good for a bike, but what is good for e-scooters, which actually require quite a different design. So I just thought I'd make that comment, and I'd be really keen to see what sort of things are being proposed. Thank you. Okay, are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, I'm going to move on to item 5.2 then. Are there any questions arising from 5.2? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor. My query is just in terms of, I guess, process and the original assessment of this development when it first came. There's a comment in there around due to the 1.9 metre setback of the eaves, the original magnolia trees wouldn't have been able to contribute more than X square metres of canopy cover. And I'm just wondering about, I guess, when that assessment was done originally around landscaping, whether that limitation could have been identified. And that's not a criticism, and just, yeah, if there's a way that we can think about the prevention of non-compliance later.
Through you, presiding member, I agree with that observation. When this application was originally approved through the DAP, this was some time ago, and I suppose at that time we had a relatively new built form policy where we were still trying to apply those provisions around canopy cover and a better understanding of that. I think since then we've come some way. Again, it was silent in the report around whether it is or isn't appropriate to anticipate full maturity in terms of canopy spread. So I guess on that basis, I can't provide the logic as to why that is the case, but that is a reasonable observation in terms of making sure that it is accurate at the time of assessment and being more realistic about what you could expect to see.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. I did some Googling this week around honey locust trees. It seems, there are lots of benefits to them. They seem pretty adaptable. They grow quickly. Notwithstanding, I had the question about whether any native trees had been considered for the car parking area. Thank you.
To you, presiding member, I'll take that on notice and confirm.
Are there any other questions from any councillors? Councillor Warner.
Thank you. I guess I just want some clarification. When I was reading this, I thought that the bamboo hadn't been put in yet, and then I realised that it had. But just looking at the public questions, there's people suggesting that there are still visibility issues, people being able to see into their apartments and things. Is that still a problem, even though we've got the bamboo, which is currently at least 1.6 metres high?
Through you, presiding member, administration's view is no, it is not an issue in as far as overlooking goes. We've included some site images. We've undertaken numerous inspections to represent what that view would be, and you can see that it does exceed 1.6 metres, which is the height standard, at least under the R codes around visual privacy, and it's also thickened out, and that's progressed relatively quickly since it was planted a year or so ago. So you can see that in the officer report in the comment section. So on that basis, and in assessing it against the objectives of visual privacy, we're satisfied that it would achieve that outcome of providing visual privacy to the adjoining property.
Thank you. So, yeah, the pictures looked like it was all sufficiently covered and stuff, but the public comments are sort of suggesting that it's still really exposed. So I was just wondering if I'd missed something there.
Through you, presiding member, no, you haven't missed something. There's just different expectations, I suppose, in terms of the desired visual privacy or screening treatment. Originally, when this was approved, there were fixed battens, if you will, and that was, I suppose, from the adjoining residents' perspective, that's their expectation. It is available to any applicant to propose an amendment, and that's what is before us, and they're seeking a reconsideration to say we achieve the same outcome, except through a different means, a softer greening means. And ultimately, we've undertaken that assessment against the policy objectives and arrived at the conclusion that it is appropriate.
Are there any further questions from councillors? I have a question. In relation to the original battens that had been proposed in the approved development, what degree of visibility would that have still enabled in the event that the bamboo had not been planted out?
To you, presiding member, in terms of the amount of visibility, it was based on the definition of screening devices in the R code. So that's very specifically prescribed, but it's effectively 75% visually impermeable. So it's not 100% solid. That's not the term of adequate screening device under the R codes. It's 75%. So it still allows some permeability.
So effectively, we're looking to ensure that any deviation from the original approval achieves at least 75% impermeability, it sounds like. So I'm just confirming. I have another question in relation to this. With this particular instance, has all the bamboo already been planted out, or is there still more to be planted out?
To you, presiding member, it's the former. It's already been planted out.
And in relation to the other trees that are going to be planted, what sort of timeframes are stipulated by which they have to have been planted in order to be compliant?
To you, presiding member, that's covered in condition 1.1. So it's within 28 days. Should this be approved, those trees will need to be planted in the front setback area.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from any councillors in relation to this item? Okay, I'm going to move on, noting that item 5.3 has been withdrawn. Yes, so item 5.3 has been withdrawn. We've dealt with item 5.4. Item 5.5 will be coming to the next meeting only, which brings us to item 5.6, licence to Broadway Unit Trust on Road Reserve adjacent to number 148 Scarborough Beach Road, Mount Hawthorn. Right, so are there any questions from councillors in relation to this item? Councillor Warner.
Thank you. Yeah, this has become a bit of a landmark in Mount Hawthorn, but since that appeared, there's been some other eateries that have come up alongside. So I was just wondering if there's been any consultation with them or any feedback from them about what they would think about this being extended. Is it a workable thing for them, or are they against it? Or I don't know. I'm just wondering.
Through
Manager.
Through the chair. So the normal process of what would happen here is that what council's been asked to consider tonight is a license to grant the use of the land. In order for the structure to remain on that piece of land, if council grants the license, they'll then need to go through a planning approval process. And through that process, the planning team will undertake consultation. I understand that would be to a radius of about 200 metres for approximately 28 days.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to follow on from that, so that development application, will that be coming to council or will that be determined by administration?
Through the chair, that would be coming to council. There's no delegation for that type of decision.
Thank you. And just flagging a few questions which may relate to the development application. There's been discussion in the past about shared space and not having exclusive right to footpath areas. Just wondering, what do we consider in this licence application that there is still sufficient footpath access between the premises and the alfresco area for all users, including prams and wheelchairs and anyone else? Is that considered as part of this particular application, or will that be considered in the development application?
Through the chair, that's technically considered as part of the alfresco dining permit process, which is like step 3 of this. So step 1 is council consents to them using the land. Step 2 would be for development approval for the structure on the land. Step 3 would be for a license to use the area for public eating, and that means them complying with the requirements to maintain a clear and accessible pathway. So if there are obstructions into that, if they decide to put tables against the building or that reduces the pathway width, then that becomes a matter for dealing with under our local law.
Thanks. And so when we get to step 2 and 3, can they be dealt with together at the same council meeting just to expedite the process?
Through the chair. So step 2 would be a decision of council. Step 3 is basically a declaration of compliance and is an automated approval that they would be able to submit once they get council's consent for the development approval.
Okay. And just further, the issue of the blinds and them being permanently down or up or adjustable, will that be part of the development application?
Through the chair. So I understand that they would be seeking to retain the blinds, and that would be open to council to considering whether or not that's appropriate. So the trigger for this being a other proposal is the fact that it incorporates the blinds and doesn't meet the requirements of an EATLERT.
So is that at this step or the development application step?
That will be at the development application step.
Okay, so are there any further questions in relation to this item at this stage of the process? Councillor Hallett.
Sorry, I'm just scanning through the confidential attachment, which I'm going to ask a question, but shouldn't raise any issues. Just is there inclusion of the lost parking revenue built into the license amount?
Through the chair, this site has not previously been a parking bay.
Are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, going to move on. So the next item is item 6.1, response to petition corner Scarborough Beach Road and Killarney Street. Okay. So councillors, Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question. I note the that we're really just being recommended to investigate further. But in the report, it says that typically this street would not warrant any road safety intervention. Just wondering, does the sensitive use of the primary school factor into that consideration at the next step?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. The school would factor into the traffic warrant scoring and considerations to future precinct traffic calming would consider the school, yep.
And if it was the recommendation at the next stage that more signage should be installed, even if that was over and above the requirements of main roads, does that present an issue, or are they generally fairly understanding of that?
Through the chair, yeah, they're fairly understanding main roads. It's worth noting that the engineering team have been doing several little projects around the school. Main roads have been really helpful on one of the crossing signs needed moved, and they were very helpful in that space. So yeah, to do work really collaboratively once the school's involved, yeah.
Councillor LaFontaine.
Thank you, Mayor. The comments state that because of the traffic data that the street typically doesn't warrant any road safety intervention. I'm just wondering, if the works progress, does the works come under the minor traffic management improvement budget?
Through the chair, yes, it would. The traffic management improvement budget's fully muni funded. If it did warrant traffic calming, we would look at other revenues such as main roads to help that funding stream. But yeah, it would come through the muni funded traffic management.
It does come from that.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions in relation to this item? Okay, so now I'm just going to move on to the next item, which is item 6.2, response to petition Ellesmere Street, North Perth parking. Okay, are there any questions from any councillors? Councillor LaFontaine.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. In reference to point 4 of the petition, the resident mentioned the high speed over the hill down to London Street. I was just wondering, because of the averages provided, if administration can provide any information on the number perhaps of vehicles that are travelling over the speed limit heading west, so down the hill, instead of averaging it down and up the hill. Thank you.
Through the chair, I believe the report has the section of Ellesmere Street from Eaton Street to Charles Street. That was specifically mentioned within the petition. The traffic volumes is 14,456. So just over 1,400 vehicles per day, and there is average speeds of 37.8 kilometers an hour, and the 85th percentile is 44 kilometers per hour. So that information is within the table. The engineering team can look at Ellesmere Street further down. That wouldn't be an issue, but just in response to the petition, we're looking at this section of Ellesmere Street from Eaton Street to Charles Street.
So you're not looking at the section mentioned in the dot point 4 between Eaton Street and London Street?
Sorry, through the chair, yes, I correct myself. That section was looked at, but specifically the development is taken into consideration. That's what I refer to in regards to the traffic volumes. We were looking at Eaton Street to Charles Street, factoring into future development in that location. But yes, you're right, that London Street to Charles Street is that section we would look at with further investigations to happen.
Yes, I'm just asking Ken, we received some information on the speeds heading east and west between Eaton Street and London Street.
Through the chair, yes, the engineering team can put out counters and gather that info. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from any councillors? Councillor Hallett.
Just for clarity, but that wouldn't be in time for the meeting, would it? That's proposed for future.
Through the chair, that's correct. The counters can be put out to get accurate information, but we might have some historical information that we could pull, but it could be several years old, that's all.
Okay, are there any further questions from councillors in relation to this item? Okay, moving on. So the next item is item 6.3, outcome of advertising and adoption of amendments to asset management policy. Are there any questions from any councillors? Okay, moving on. 6.4, Keilor Community Farmers Market, waiver of fees. Are there any questions from any councillors in relation to this proposal? Councillor Alexander.
I only had one, which was there's 2.1 where they get the reserve for free, and then there's waste service. You know, I presume administration's had a good look at that, because it's quite a different thing to waive a fee to hire the reserve, but then it's a completely different thing to be providing a waste service for free. Presume, given that administration's put this up, they're happy with that. I just wanted to double check that.
Manager.
Thank you. Through the chair, the manager of community facilities, unfortunately, having some technical challenges to be online tonight, so I'll take the comments on notice and put something into the brief. This is replicating two previous approvals within essentially the same parameters. So given that the previous two approvals went through on that basis, I would expect that administration is reflecting what's occurred in the past.
Okay, so additional information will be supplied as part of the briefing for the next meeting. Okay, are there any further questions from councillors in relation to this item? Okay, moving on. Okay, 7.1 financial statements as at 31st of October 2023. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor LaFontaine. So I'm so sorry. I thought you had your hand up. Beg your pardon. It's probably just floaters in my eye or something. Any councillors have any comments or questions they want to make at this point? Okay, moving on. 7.2, authorisation of expenditure for the period of 1st of October 2023 to 31st of October 2023. Councillor Warner.
Thank you. This one caught my eye. Transportation of public artwork to Titan storage. Can we find out what that was? I'm just curious, basically. I'd like to know what was being moved around.
Yes, we can put that in the briefing notes.
Okay, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question about the removal of existing and new equipment at Charles Ferry Yard Reserve. I was just wondering what that referred to, and if there's any information you might be able to put in the briefing notes, that'd be great. Thanks.
Through the chair, we'll include that in the briefing notes as well.
Okay, are there any further questions that people would like additional information on? Okay, we're going to move on to the next matter, which is outcome of advertising and adoption of new child safe awareness policy. That's what. Oh, beg your pardon. 7.3, investment report as at 31st of October 2023. Apologies for that. Are there any questions from any councillors in relation to this item? Okay, I'm going to move on. Item 7.4, outcome of advertising and adoption of new child safe awareness policy. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. I noticed in the report, it said that there was one submission that requested that the policy include the child protective resources and a link to some of those resources, which was noted, alongside the comment that resources and guidelines are available on the DLGSC website. And I can understand if that's sort of not the intention of this policy document, which speaks to support of community organisations. But I was wondering, notwithstanding, if there was any scope, perhaps on a landing page or something, to direct people to some of those child protective resources. Thanks.
Through Mayor Zaman, we can include those links on our webpage to when we talk about community facilities and other services, to be able to provide a link through to the department's website.
Thank you. That'd be wonderful.
Okay, are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, I'm going to move on. So 7.5, outcome of advertising and adoption of amendments to diversity, access and inclusion policy. Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor Zamont. Acknowledging that in the report it said that 2 public submissions were received and they're detailed. Do we know if those submissions were done in consultation with any disabled people, or if any disabled people submitted as part of the submission process?
Mayor Zaman, I'm not aware of the status of the 2 submitters, but if we do have the information, we can include it in the briefing notes if it's not confidential.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions in relation to this item number? Okay, moving on. 7.6, annual report, 2022-23. Are there any questions in relation to the report that's been circulated? Okay, I'm going to move on. Sorry.
Through you, Mayor, just to note that the annual report obviously will attach the financial statements for the year, and we'll be shortly circulating the financial statements to the audit committee, which is meeting on Thursday, which means we should be able to attach the financial statements for the OCM with the audit committee minutes for next Tuesday's OCM, in order to adopt the annual report, financial statements, and schedule the annual general meeting of electors in early February.
Okay, are there any questions that arise out of that further information? Okay, I'm going to move on. So move to item 8.1, council recess period 2023-24, delegated authority to the CEO. Do any councillors have any questions in relation to this item? Councillor LaFontaine.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. With the traffic management procurement of $6 million mentioned here, what happened to that decision over this period? Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair. In essence, council provides the CEO delegated authority to have an approval of that particular tender. Should it be ready at that time? Just a point of clarification while I have the opportunity. In the last paragraph of the report, it states that Main Roads has made changes to the Traffic Management Company registration scheme, and those changes will come into effect on 1st December 2023. Received an email today that the Commissioner has deferred that until 1st of February 2024. That does still make, regardless, the acquiring of that service still important because of some of the changes in the environment in that space.
Councillor Hallett. I had follow-up from Councillor LaFontaine. Sorry about that. I jumped the gun.
Thank you. Could we please be provided with the information on the tender of that project? Thank you.
Certainly what normally happens is that when a decision is going to be made under a delegated authority, a report is prepared just as it would be for council. It will just be distributed to council members. If any request from council members asks for that to be dealt with at council, it is deferred. But if we don't get any requests, then it would be approved under delegated authority. So the council members do get the opportunity to review the report and the likely outcome.
Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. And just in terms of that process, can we include a text message or phone call to councillors as well as that being sent to us by email?
Through the chair, yep, confirming that's fine.
Are there any further questions? I had a question. So in relation to certainly a phone call or a text following up would be helpful, but I had a question about the 3 days. So for example, if it was given on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day and Boxing Day, I'm going to hazard a guess. I'm not going to be checking my emails or anything. So can I get an idea? Is that 3 working days?
Through the chair, confirming it would be 3 working days, and just noting that at this stage the city is intended to close for the holiday period. So that would be from the 23rd to the 1st of January. So no business would be occurring at that time. Should there be an urgent decision, it would wait until there are 3 business days ahead of it.
Thank you. Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question around this procurement coming up at this time of the year in the future. Given that it is always a delegated period for the city, could we consider the term of the next tender or contract so it doesn't land within the delegated period in the future?
Through the chair, absolutely. We are late in renewing this. It's administration's error in that. We would have hoped to have had it done much earlier. So that would be the intent. We don't like to have to make those large decisions outside the normal council parameters.
Okay, are there any further questions in relation to this item? Okay, moving on. So the next item is 8.2, appointment of council members and community representatives to advisory groups. I'm going to, I'll firstly just ask if there's any general questions, and secondly, if I can just get an early indication from councillors if they are interested in putting their hand up for nomination. But before I get to the second part, are there any questions about this particular item first? Okay, can I just get an indication at this point of any councillors that are thinking of putting their hand up? Well, okay, we've got Councillor LaFontaine. Are there any others? I think previously Councillor Wallace indicated an interest. It's up to 4 people. Councillor Hallett, you had previously said, oh, shaking the head. No. Okay, so we've got 2. Okay. So that might, well, of course, you've got a week to decide if you're interested. We do have up to 4, but my understanding is that previously it's usually been a couple of people that have been on that. So that's fine. Okay. Any further questions in relation to item 8.2? Okay, so then 8.3, meeting attendance fees for independent committee members. Right, are there any questions in relation to that item?
Isn't that item been deferred?
Item 8.4, the information bulletin. Are there any questions arising from this? Okay, in that case, I'm going to thank those live stream viewers, the several hundred that are currently tuned in at the moment, and thank you. And I'm going to close the meeting at 6:51. Thank you. Please stop the live.